Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the podcast that I, your host, David Woodruff, lovingly call the Woodruff Report. Different time slot today. I'm talking in the morning as opposed to the afternoon. I hope it doesn't throw off the schedules too much, but it's just how things worked out. Morning, afternoon, really, what is time anyway? The usual housekeeping things. Check out the iTunes, YouTube channel, ASAP, send feedback. I'll try to get on top of it. Not much more to say on that. Let's get into the actual sports. March Madness has begun. We've already seen our first colossal upset. Buffalo taking down 4th seed Arizona with likely number 1 pick DeAndre Ayton. My bracket is completely shattered. I had Arizona winning in at least 2. But another example of the beauty of March Madness. I, of course, couldn't really enjoy the upset for what it was. I was sobbing over the remains of my dead bracket, which I will now cremate and spread across the world, as I do every year. But one upset that I could enjoy was Loyola of Chicago beating the U. I actually picked it, and if you were watching the game, it was a buzzer-beating 3 to win 64-62. I was going insane. My friends were going insane. It was Exhibit A for why March Madness is so incredible, and I wish I'd picked Buffalo because I probably would have been celebrating and doing the same thing anyway. But unfortunately, this podcast is not really going to be about March Madness, seeing as we're still only halfway through round 1 action. We've got another large slate of games today going on. As I speak, Providence and Texas A&M are locking horns. Purdue and Cal State Fullerton are going at it, and a lot of games are going on today. Hectic couple days in March Madness, but we love it. One thing that I would like to say that's weird about March Madness is the regions that people are seated in. Because, teams from the East Coast sometimes are in the West region. And since they're played at a neutral site, these arenas are oftentimes empty, even though March Madness is so popular. Looking at some of these arenas when, Michigan is playing Montana in Wichita State in Kansas, you would think, oh, well, I guess Americans sort of like March Madness, when in reality, that's, Americans' favorite thing on the entire planet. And, I mean, I don't have any good solution to fix it, but I do like to complain, so I felt like bringing it up. The seeding thing and these neutral sites that these teams play at oftentimes lead to these empty arenas. And it seems like schools would and the NCAA would want to do something about this just because half-filled stadiums is not as much revenue. I mean, I'm sure they make billions of dollars off March Madness anyway, but I mean, you could make $1 billion plus $1 if you could sell out these arenas. So get on that, NCAA. I know you're out there listening. You're probably going to do exactly what I say because some random dude from San Francisco tells you to do something. But get on that. Check it out. Maybe try to fix it. But as I said before, because March Madness is not so very long, we're not so far into it, I should say, this podcast is not going to be about the dance. Next week, we'll definitely have a podcast talking about the hectic first weekend and the first few games. But right now I'm going to kind of let it sit, let it simmer, let these teams do what they can do. But the podcast schedule, I might kind of change it up to fit March Madness. When there's an off day where no one's playing, I might come at you with the podcast about what has happened up to so far, preview of matchups, etc. So be ready for that. Podcasts may be coming thick and fast during March Madness month. But on this podcast, I want to talk about a little Champions League action. Our second group of round of 16 games went down. We had big matchups like Sevilla, Man United, Chelsea, Barcelona. We also had another good one in Roma Shakhtar Donetsk, two teams that maybe aren't as well known, but one of the most exciting ties. And then we also had Bayern Besiktas, which looked to be over before it started, but the game has to be played, and maybe Besiktas was going to win 6-0. You never know. And if you don't know, maybe they did. You'll just have to listen on to find out. So, Woodruff Report coming at you. I'm your host, David Woodruff. Let's talk some soccer. Let's talk some basketball. Let's do it all. Starting in 3, 2, 1. The Champions League is back, and we had some exciting ties, as I alluded to earlier. Let's start in Barcelona, and Chelsea had it all to do going into the intimidating Camp Nou to face mighty Barcelona. The tie was tied at 1-1 after the game at Stamford Bridge. Many people were wondering whether Chelsea would rue their missed chances. Willian hit the post a couple of times, and Barcelona grabbed a late equalizer by none other than Lionel Messi to make it 1-1. And now Chelsea cannot sit back and absorb Barcelona's pressure. They're going to have to be out on the front foot and try to get that precious away goal. And it's going to be hard against this Barcelona team, and we saw that early. Just 2 minutes into the game, after a classic Barcelona passing move, the ball's bouncing around the pitch, back to the left, back to the right. Let's go back to the left side. I like the grass over there a little bit better. No, let's switch it back to the right. Then Messi says, okay, enough with this seesawing. Let's do a little 1-2. With the aid of a fortunate deflection, the ball ends up to Suarez, who knocks it into Messi's feet. Messi, from, of course, an impossible angle because he's tired of scoring easy goals, Megs, one of the best keepers in the world in Thibaut Courtois, right between his legs. A theme that would be revisited later in the game, actually. 1-0 Barcelona, and now Chelsea are in real trouble. Down 2-1 on aggregate and needing to get a goal to tie it. They cannot just sit back and try to settle for a 0-0 tie. Things did not get much better for Chelsea. A Fabregas, maybe he was a double agent, by the way. Fabregas, he has many friends on the Barcelona team. A terrible giveaway to the best player in the world in Messi. And Messi skips away from two defenders and sort of holds the ball up. Every player on Chelsea is sprinting towards Messi to try to stop him because, of course, he's going to do some ridiculous thing and score. Messi says, I see the whole team running towards me, so why don't I pull it back to my other world-class midfielder, Dembele. Dembele takes a touch and rockets it top corner because that's what someone on Barcelona does. When they shoot, it goes top corner. 2-0 Barcelona, and Chelsea's hopes are all but dead and buried. Chelsea did have a few chances in this game. A huge penalty shout in the second half from Marcus Alonso. And Alonso actually, at the very closing moments of the first half, hits a free kick that kisses the outside of the post, sweetly hit. Unfortunately, does not nestle into the back of the net, hits the post and bounces harmlessly away. So Chelsea again hitting the post, and it's just been that kind of tie for them. So they go into the break 2-0 down. Penalty shout in the second half. Marcus Alonso threw on goal. A couple Barcelona defenders draped on his back, and he goes down. Ref says no penalty. Giroud almost punches him in the face. He's so mad. Every person in London is yelling at the referee. The referee is unfazed and go on with your play. And that's what they do. No foul. Later, Chelsea would hit the bar again on a corner kick, but not before Messi made it 3-0 to Barcelona. Suarez gets the ball at another Chelsea mistake, dribbles diagonally, cutting through the heart of the Chelsea defense, and then lays it off to Messi. He says, Messi, I'm a little tired. Why don't you just finish this off for me? Why don't you dribble the last four players and then make Courtois from another impossible angle? Messi says, okay, that sounds fun. Gathers the ball up, races past a couple of defenders from a similarly impossible angle. Megs Courtois, the keeper, this time with his left foot. 3-0 Barcelona. The game is at this point a formality. Chelsea are embarrassed. They would hit the bar on a corner kick to add insult to injury, Rudiger. And 3-0 is how it would end. Barcelona advances to the next round. Chelsea go home. An unlucky tie for them because they actually played pretty well at times. Huge question marks now surrounding Antonio Conte. Of course, the Chelsea management is always quick to fire a manager and not worried about what kind of contract he is locked into. Conte has alluded to being unhappy many times, and it seems more than likely that that will be the last time Conte coaches Chelsea in the Champions League. Let's move on to the other headline game. Manchester United hosted Sevilla at Old Trafford. The score was 0-0 on aggregate after the first tie in the Ramon Sanchez Pizjuan in Sevilla. De Gea made a few incredible saves, including one point-blank parry off a Luis Muriel, where it seemed harder for Muriel to miss than to make it, and De Gea made an incredible save. He made a few others, and the tie eventually ended 0-0. So, advantage Man United in front of the rowdy home crowd in Manchester, and sort of a tame first half, no real chances either way. Marouane Fellaini probably had the best chance of the half. By the way, why was he starting? I don't really know. Just more question marks around Jose Mourinho, but Fellaini was starting. And if you really want a chance to fall to somebody, and you want them to score, Fellaini's not the person that you want. Scoring goals is not with his feet is not really what he does. He's more of an aerial threat, midfield boss. But of course, Manchester United's best chance of the first half falls to Fellaini. Fellaini goes for power, hits it right at Sergio Rico, who's able to parry around. That's the best half for the Red Devils in the first half. Game is still scoreless going into the 75th minute when super sub Ben Yedder for Sevilla comes on the field, and just 120 seconds into being on the field, he scores the first goal. He is slipped through a wonderful pass. He sorts his feet out, uses his quickness to get around Bailly, and hits one into the bottom corner. De Gea is just a little bit late, can't get a fingertip on it. And 1-0 Sevilla. And now Man United are going to need 2 goals because of the irritating away goal rule, which everyone on earth hates but still exists for some reason. And the 5 minutes after you score a goal are when you're most vulnerable. But this got reversed in this game. Sevilla scored again just 2 minutes later off a corner kick. There's a Sevilla man standing literally unmarked in acres of space at the front post to flick it on. Ball ends up at the back post. Ben Yedder's there. He headers it. De Gea tries to hit it over the bar but sort of whiffs. The ball is up in the air, sort of slowly trickling into the goal. De Gea punches it out of the goal, but goal line technology says, "See!" The ball was in the back of the net. 2-0 Sevilla. They're going crazy. Shirts are flying off. Subs are running on the field. Celebrations are ensuing. The Sevilla fans who made the trek are going nuts. And Manchester United seem good, dead and buried. They would have a few chances. Lukaku hit over from point-blank range, sort of a half chance. But he would score off a corner kick. Ball beats the first man. There's sort of calamity in the box, and he's there to slam it home to make it 2-1. And there were still 6 minutes left, so if Manchester United scored again, we could have been in for a nervy few minutes. Martial had a chance but cut it back. He tried to cut it back to the PK spot. No Manchester United player was there. That was the best chance. Sevilla had another chance late on, a one-on-one, because Manchester United were pushed so high up the field. De Gea saved with his right foot. 2-1 to Sevilla. They move on, and Manchester United are knocked out. question marks surrounding Jose Mourinho, similarly to Antonio Conte. Is he going to be coaching the Red Devils next season? We don't know. Now let's move on to the sort of lesser games. Let's start with the easy one, Bayern Besiktas. I don't really need to tell you much about this game. Bayern won the first leg of the tie 5-0 after Besiktas got an early red card. And Bayern went on their way to just pummeling Besiktas, scoring early off a Thomas Müller cross. Ball goes into Thiago. Thiago cannot miss from like 2 yards out. 1-0 Bayern. Bayern would add a second before Besiktas actually scored a pretty crazy goal. If you should Google it, try to watch the highlights. It's utter chaos. I mean, the ball ends up like, it's the weirdest goal I've ever seen. I can't like describe it. It looks like something you'd see in like U5 or like kindergarten soccer, not something that you'd see in Champions League. So check that out. Pretty weird. Bayern would add a third, final score 3-1. The Turkish fans at least go home with a consolation goal and were loud throughout the game, but they were never a match for one of the favorites of the competition in Bayern Munich. 8-1 on aggregate is how it finishes. Bayern move on to the quarterfinals, where they will have a relatively easy tie against Sevilla. They should win that, but I mean, Sevilla knocked off Manchester United, so you never know. Finally, my favorite game of the week, Shakhtar Donetsk was hosted by Roma in the Estadio Olimpico in wonderful Rome. The score was 2-1 to Shakhtar after a thrilling first leg in Ukraine, and this was a tight affair. No real chances in the first half. Best chance of the game, Kolarov gets the ball on the left-hand side, tries to drive a low cross into Dzeko. Goalie comes out to sort of parry it. Game was much more exciting in the second half, however, and a wonderful ball puts Dzeko in one-on-one with the goalie. He megs him to make it 2-2, and now Roma lead on the irritating away goal rule that we all hate, but they still lead, so the Ukrainians have it all to do now. They push forward. Dzeko should have had another one, hits one, and it whistles just wide. He was already turning off in celebration. Half the stadium was already going nuts, but ball whistles just wide. Still hope for Shakhtar, who did not really have any terrific chances in this game. Roma did a very good job shutting them down. And then what really, the final nail in the coffin, Shakhtar receives a red card, ball's played through to Dzeko, and the center back has no choice but to pull him down. He does. Ref gives a straight red. It was the correct decision. And then calamity ensues. A Shakhtar player runs across the field to a ball boy to try to get a ball to, like, I guess, get the game going again. And he takes the ball and in the process pushes the ball boy, who flips over the advertising signboard. So this Shakhtar player just annihilates this Roma ball boy, which was actually hilarious to watch him flipping into there. Of course, the Roma players get all indignant and start arguing and fake pushing as if they're going to fight. I mean, soccer's worse than even the NBA. In the NBA, there's at least a chance that something will happen. I mean, remember when Oubre actually punched or pushed that Celtics player down in last year's playoff? In soccer, there's literally no hope that there will be a fight unless you're in like the Brazilian third division. If you're in the Brazilian third division, then there will be a fight and fans will start throwing bricks onto the field and someone will probably end up with a knife. But otherwise, they're just going to do this fake pushy thing and argue and get in each other's face. Hold me back, as if no one held them back, they would go crazy like the Tasmanian devil, start punching everybody. No other chances in the game. Roma advances 2-2 is the final aggregate score. Roma advances on away goals into the next round. And we've got some exciting games going on in the next round, headlined by Juventus Real Madrid. That is going to be an exciting fixture. I cannot wait. It's going to be great. I cannot wait. It's going to be great. Quarterfinals coming up next in the Champions League. after an exciting leg second leg of round of 16 games. One more time to round it up. Barcelona beat Chelsea 3-0. Sevilla beat Manchester United 2-1. Shakhtar lost to Roma 1-0, and Roma advanced on away goals, and Bayern took care of Besiktas 3-1, 8-1 on aggregate. So before I sign off on this podcast, I wanted to talk about a little idea I had. And just hear it out. It may be a little weird at first, but I think you guys should give it a chance. So here's my idea. It pertains to basketball. So after the first half of a game, there is no guarantee that there's a second half. The teams go into like a feud room or something, or a tight little space where they can look at each other, and a dice is rolled to see if the second half of the game is played. If the game's tied going into halftime, automatically there is a second half. But then it depends on how lopsided the score is. For example, if a team is up 10 going into halftime, if the roll is a 4, 5, or 6, the game automatically ends. If they're only up 5, if they're up between 5 to 10, they need a 5 or a 6, and then the game ends. If they're up by less than 5, they just need a 6, and the game will eventually end. If they're up more than 10, it keeps going. So if they're up 15, they only need the game ends on a 3, 4, 5, 6. If they're up 20, a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If they're up 25, any roll, the game just is auto ended unless they just want to play the second half, I guess. I don't know. I haven't really thought it through that much. Here's why I think this would be a good idea. Suddenly, the end of the first half would be crunch time. There wouldn't be teams turning it on for the fourth quarter. I watch a lot of Warriors games, and sometimes the first half is kind of listless. Like, no one's really playing super defense until that fourth quarter, where teams start to lock in and say, okay, let's go win this game now. Not to say that the players aren't playing hard, but I think that this would make the second quarter akin to the fourth quarter, and crunch time would now be widened. So now, if you were down 6 on a final possession, this is huge. If you get a bucket here, you pretty much have a guarantee of a second half. Otherwise, the chances of you actually being able to play a second half are diminished. And I think this is really interesting, because now that final shot's going to be huge, and the end of the second quarter is going to be like the end of the fourth quarter. Of course, in all reality, this would just not work. I mean, advertisers would absolutely hate it. Fans who paid to come see the game would absolutely hate it. But, I mean, I still think it's kind of cool to talk about. And even though it will never happen and will probably never even be proposed, I still think it's fun to just talk about it and act like it may happen in some imaginary third dimension world. So that's all I wanted to say about that. Introducing a die roll to the NBA or college basketball to see if there will be a second half of a game, thus increasing crunch time. So this has been the Woodruff Report. I'm your host, David Woodruff. On this episode, we talked a little bit about March Madness. Then we went in depth on the second leg of the round of 16 games in Champions League, and finally finished with a proposal for NBA or college basketball to increase crunch time and make the game a little more interesting. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please check in again. I may be going off schedule with March Madness, so be sure to check in. There may be a podcast sitting there that wouldn't normally be there. Thank you so much for listening. Please tune in again next week. This has been the Woodruff Report. I'm your host, David Woodruff. Have a terrific Friday. Have a terrific weekend. Have a terrific week.